I, 18 female, was raised by my dad. My mother abandoned me when I was only 2 years old. No calls, no birthday cards, no letters, just gone, like I never existed. For the first 16 years of my life, it was just my dad and me. He worked long hours, sometimes even took on extra jobs to make sure I had what I needed. He was never the cuddly type, but he was a constant. I didn't have a traditional family, but I always thought I mattered to him, that I was enough. When I turned 16, my father met Linda. He was smitten, completely and utterly in love, the kind of love where he seemed like a different person. Linda was charming, beautiful, and knew exactly how to wrap him around her finger. She had 2 daughters, Sarah, 14 at the time, and Emily, 12 at the time. At first, I was excited. I thought, finally, I'll have a family. I even entertained the idea that maybe I'd have a mother figure again, someone to fill the empty space my mom had left. But that dream shattered quickly. Linda was like a character out of a horror story, the evil stepmother who hides her claws behind a fake smile. She was subtle at first, with little comments that seemed harmless but cut deep. Like, "Oh, your room is so big. The girls are cramped in their room. Wouldn't it be fair for them to have it since they're sharing?" She convinced my dad that her daughters needed more space and that I should be mature and give up my room. Without a second thought, he took my room and moved me into a small, cramped space that barely fit my bed and dresser. That was just the beginning. Over the next year, my dad went from being my only family to a stranger who prioritized Linda and her daughters at every turn. Sarah and Emily were spoiled with gifts, shopping trips, and constant attention. Meanwhile, my gift was being told to be responsible and handle the extra chores around the house. Sarah and Emily got everything, while I became the family maid, doing dishes, laundry, and cleaning up after everyone. Linda's daughters were treated like princesses, and I was the outsider in my own home. I couldn't believe how my father had changed. It looked like Linda put a spell on him. Then, one day, I came home from school earlier than usual because I was feeling sick, and I saw something I can never forget. Linda was in the kitchen, passionately kissing our next-door neighbor, a married man with kids. I felt sick to my stomach. Linda noticed me before I could even process what I'd seen. She pulled me aside and told me that if I ever said a word to my father, she'd make sure I was kicked out of the house. She warned me that I was barely tolerated as it was, and that my dad had a new family to focus on. She made it clear that if I didn't keep my mouth shut, I'd be out on the streets. She even sneered and said, "What would happen to you if you didn't have your father? You have no one else, remember?" I was 16, terrified, and I believed her. My dad had changed so much since marrying Linda, and I was terrified that he'd take her side. So I kept quiet, feeling like I was swallowing poison every time I saw Linda with my father, knowing the truth. I was trapped, stuck in a house where I was invisible, and forced to keep a secret that tore me apart. For the next 2 years, I lived in silence. I avoided Linda, Sarah, and Emily as much as possible, and whenever I was around my dad, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Linda continued her affair openly, right under my father's nose. And every day, I grew angrier. Not just at her, but at my dad, too. How could he not see what was going on? How could he treat me like I was disposable, like I didn't even exist? Finally, the day came when I turned 18. I woke up feeling hopeful, maybe. I thought my dad would at least remember my birthday, that maybe he'd acknowledge me in some small way. But when I went downstairs, there was no happy birthday, no card, no small gesture, nothing. Instead, my dad was busy consoling Sarah, who had come in crying because she'd scratched the car he'd bought her just a few months earlier. He was so focused on her, so worried about fixing her car, that he didn't even look at me. I felt numb. All these years of being ignored, pushed aside, and belittled, and now, on one of the biggest days of my life, I was completely forgotten. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't have to stay in a place where I was unwanted, where my own father couldn't even bother to remember my birthday. I went to my room, packed a bag with as much as I could carry, and sat down to write him a letter. In the letter, I poured out everything I'd been holding back. I told him about Linda's affair with the neighbor and how she'd threatened to kick me out if I told him. I wrote about how much it hurt to be cast aside for his new family, how he'd let Linda and her daughters take over my life and my home. I told him how I'd watched for years as he prioritized them over me, forgetting that I was his child too. And then I left. I walked out of that house without looking back, cutting off all contact with him and with Linda's family. I moved in with a friend who was kind enough to take me in, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I could finally breathe without feeling like I was constantly suffocating in that toxic household. Months passed, and I heard nothing from him. Not a single call, text, or message to check on me, to ask if I was okay, to apologize. It was like I truly didn't exist to him anymore. My friends and their family supported me, and I managed to find a part-time job, just enough to get by. I slowly started to rebuild my life, but the hurt and anger stayed. Then, just recently, I heard through a mutual friend that my father had found the letter. According to them, he was devastated, broken by what I had written. Apparently, he confronted Linda, who denied everything and accused me of lying, saying I made up the affair to hurt their happy family. And my father believed her. He actually believed her over me, his own daughter, the one he'd known his entire life. When I found this out, it shattered me all over again. He hadn't even tried to reach out to me from my side of the story. Instead, he'd accepted Linda's lies and written me off completely. Hearing that was like pouring salt on an open wound, reminding me just how little I'd meant to him in the end. I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if he ever found out the truth, if he ever looked into the affair, or if he's still with Linda, blindly following her lead. Part of me feels guilty for exposing her and leaving the way I did. I sometimes wonder if I should have kept quiet, just left without revealing the affair, and spared myself the pain of knowing he'd choose her over me again. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for leaving that letter and going no contact with my father? OP's father not only neglected her, but he let himself be manipulated by Linda to the point where he forgot his own child. The fact that he didn't even check with OP about the letter and just believed Linda's lies shows he's not worthy of being called a father. OP did the right thing for her own sanity. OP deserves a family that cares about her, not one that treats her like an outsider. Truth always comes out, so one day OP's father will catch Linda cheating, and then OP should wait for his call. He will be begging on his knees for OP to forgive him. Or, being a doormat as he is, he might forgive Linda her affairs. Time will tell. And now let's hear the community's opinion. I'm so sorry for what you went through. You're definitely not the a-hole. Your father chose a toxic woman over his own child, and it's heartbreaking. It might be worth finding a support group or someone to talk to as you process this. The hurt of being abandoned by a parent is deep. Take care of yourself and know that you made the right choice by walking away. Not the a-hole, not even a little. You went through years of emotional neglect and cruelty, and your father let it happen. You had every right to leave that note and finally speak your truth. It sounds like you've been holding on to so much pain and betrayal for so long. You deserve a fresh start where you're valued and loved. Don't feel guilty for putting yourself first after all you endured. Wow, just wow. You are absolutely not the a-hole. Linda is toxic, and your father clearly failed you in ways he'll never understand. But look at what you've done. You stood up for yourself and walked away from a place that made you miserable. That's incredibly brave. Stick to your decision. Focus on building a life full of real love and support. And don't let guilt hold you back. You deserve so much better. Hubby and I together for 8 years, married for 2. I'm nearing on 3 months pregnant, so the 12-week scan is coming up, and if everything is looking good, we'll be announcing soon to our family and friends. Exciting. Nobody else knows. Only issue is, my brother-in-law is extremely obnoxious and competitive, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with his behavior, which I suspect is about to escalate. To paint the picture, he and his wife, 30 female, have twin girls, 1.5 female. We were very happy for them when they fell pregnant, have babysat, done our best to give them really thoughtful gifts for birthdays and Christmas, helped entertain and watch them on family outings, and things like that. But the truth is, neither of us have felt 100% comfortable with the little ones because generally, brother-in-law and his wife are very self-entitled, judgmental, and critical. It just feels like you have to walk on eggshells around them in life, and it has been this way even before their children were born. It's just this general unease, and as a result, Maybe we don't fuss over the girls as much as they would like. Brother-in-law has previously been really aggressive and demanded that my husband come around and clean his house because he's done nothing to help since the girls came along, which is not true, and has made some other fairly outrageous demands, which hubby has pretty much ignored due to them being ridiculous. Whilst I appreciate that being new parents and having twins is challenging, and they are under a lot of stress, it was their decision to have kids, and they seem to think that everyone else should be altering their lifestyles to accommodate kids too. And they aren't without help. The grandparents are always around assisting. They've said we are not ready for children because we clearly aren't interested in their kids. They've gone around saying this to a lot of people, which is really hurtful in general, particularly as I feel neither of them have bothered to get to know me as a person and make such a claim. Brother-in-law constantly makes comments such as, "I can't wait until you have kids so you see how hard it is. Just you wait, and you guys have no idea," in a pretty nasty, condescending tone. These comments are always unprovoked. We have never commented on their parenting ability, and we are super accommodating and understanding of their routine and schedule, etc. We always do all we can to not make their lives any more complicated. I think brother-in-law went into their pregnancy pretty uneducated in general, and I think a lot of his frustration stems from how unprepared he was for the lifestyle change. I think he is projecting. Hubby and I are generally really passive people and choose to ignore it for the most part, or awkwardly laugh it off. I've spoken to him about this, and he thinks ignoring his brother's temper tantrums is for the best. Basically, I just want some help in handling some of these comments, and the fact I think they'll escalate once the pregnancy is announced. He's been shaming us publicly for a while in front of family and family friends for not understanding how hard it is having kids, and I'm a bit tired of feeling like a doormat. I understand his comments stem from his own frustration, but often his wife joins in, and I just find it really unnecessary and like a slap in the face, given how considerate we try to be. We're pretty confident that things will turn into, "Oh, just imagine how hard that is with two." And I feel like it is only going to get worse from here on out. It's not a competition. This is a happy time, and I'm just sick of them crapping on both of us. I don't want this to extend into him comparing his children to ours, or worse. Any advice on how I can shut down these comments in a graceful way? Or is my hubby right? Should we just continue to ignore their behavior? First of all, if it wasn't children, your brother-in-law would still be harassing you about something. He's one of those kind of people. Second, it's time to stop being passive, and it's time to go full-on mama bear. This means you protect your family, especially your children, from this jerk. You and your husband need to draw a line in the sand about what kind of behavior is off limits. If your obnoxious brother-in-law and sister-in-law consistently step over that line, then you need to severely limit your contact with them. You haven't mentioned your relationship with your mother-in-law or father-in-law, but if it's good, I suggest enlisting them to help set limits on how brother-in-law can act at family gatherings. If they don't help or allow brother-in-law to act out in front of your child, then they forfeit having their grandchildren around. I was always overweight growing up. I had severe anxiety and depression, but also felt a lot of pressure to be a perfect student, and I self-medicated with food and a few other self-harming behaviors. My parents were kind, but oblivious. Neither have any personal experience with mental illness, but they both have overweight siblings, and I think their reasoning was just, some people are overweight. I thought once I moved out of my parents' house and had more control, I'd be able to focus on losing weight. But I was in a very high-pressure program, and the stress of trying to keep it together with my anxiety and depression made weight loss fall to the wayside. I ended up graduating at 325 pounds at 5 foot 9 inches, and not being able to attend my graduation because of anxiety. I realized that I'd put it off too long, and sought out therapy and a nutritionist. Within the first 6 months, I found a great therapist, found a medication that worked for me, and lost 50 pounds. A few months later, I met my fiancé, Ben, in a local cycling group. He was funny, smart. He graduated from the same business program as me 4 years earlier. Handsome, and above all, just a really cool person. We clicked right away, and my weight wasn't an issue. He was obviously attracted to me, and was supportive of my health fitness goals without stressing about my appearance. A little over 2 years after we started dating, he proposed, and I accepted. At that point, I was down to my current weight of 140 pounds. It was now a year later, and our wedding is next month, on the 3-year anniversary of us meeting. The trouble started about 9 months ago, when I asked his sister Lisa, 30 female, to be in my bridal party. We get along well but aren't super close because she lives in another state. While we were on the phone, she got very serious and asked me if there was any way we could do dress shopping and fittings without her mother. I get along fine with my soon-to-be mother-in-law and father-in-law, but I know how a parent-child relationship can be, so I said I'd try to arrange that for her. No questions asked. She said I should talk to Ben about their parents if I wanted more details, and I said I would. So, I approached Ben, and he told me that his parents are really uptight and overbearing about weight and fitness. They are both thin and active, and his father is a doctor, a psychiatrist. Neither Ben or Lisa have ever been overweight by the medical definition, but Ben told me that they watched Lisa's weight like a hawk starting around puberty when she was a little chubby, kept a lock on their fridge, made her count calories, etc. Eventually, she developed anorexia and struggled with it for years, having to drop out of college for inpatient treatment. She's been in recovery for about 8 years now, but her relationship with her parents is strained. Hearing that, I can absolutely understand why she wouldn't want her mom at a dress fitting. Then, Ben dropped a bomb. He told me offhand that when his parents first met me, I was around 220 at that point. His parents spent months trying to pressure him to go to therapy for his issues since he was dating an obese woman. They basically thought dating me was a form of self-sabotage, or that he must have low self-esteem since he was dating a fat woman. He tried to ignore it and eventually gave them an ultimatum that this subject was off the table if they wanted to be in contact with him. I was shocked. I had not noticed anything amiss, and they were always polite to me. The only indication that something was weird was a few months before our proposal. I'd actually gotten down to 125 pounds, and I posted a picture on Facebook comparing myself at 325 to 125 and talking about mental health stuff. His mother commented, "Looking great. What is your goal weight?" At the time, I interpreted that as maybe her thinking I'd lost too much weight, which was the general consensus. I had gotten that number stuck in my head because losing 200 pounds seemed more of a big milestone than losing 185 pounds. But I wasn't happy at that weight, and am much happier at 140 pounds. I've noticed that she asks if I'm still on that diet when I see her, but I just thought she was making conversation. Now I'm pretty sure that she sees me going back up to 140 pounds as a failure in my diet and thinks I'll get fat again. I'm not sure how to proceed from here. My communication with my own parents has become very transparent and honest since I started therapy, and we've become closer because of it. I know how to talk to them. I don't know how to talk to these people, and I'm inclined now to see them as obsessive, nitpicky jerks. I obviously can't ban them from the wedding, but I'm preemptively worried about the safety of my overweight friends around them. I'm fine with limiting communication with them, but thinking about the future, I absolutely would never want those people alone with our future children after hearing about how they treated Lisa. I don't know what to do here. Do I confront them and give them an ultimatum like Ben did? Do I have that power as daughter-in-law? Is this ever going to be okay? Honestly, it sounds like Ben has done a great job of handling this, and I'd just leave it at that. Now you know they're like this, so you can do whatever you need to do to take care of your mental health. Not bring up certain topics, filter Facebook posts, whatever. I don't think confronting them would do any good if they just essentially drove their own daughter into an eating disorder. Just do what you can to avoid giving them opportunities to comment. If they do comment, just be prepared with a line, depending on personality. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." Or perhaps, "Wow, that was very rude," and walk away. So, a few years back in college, Sarah was going through a really rough patch in her life. She had lost her mother to cancer, and her younger brother acting out because of it, and nothing was really going right for her. My friend David and I had become friends with Sarah in college. We would eat lunch with her a couple times a week, text occasionally, and we had a few classes together. I liked Sarah, Cared for her a lot, but with everything that was going on in her life, I didn't feel the timing was right to ask her for a relationship. When all that went down, I decided that I would write her a letter to cheer her up. Thought it would be a nice gesture because I was always better writing things down. I minored in English. I thought maybe it would help her out a little bit, and at the same time, I could tell her that I would always be there for her if she ever needed someone. By the time I finished, it looked much more like a confession rather than a pick-me-up letter, but I felt good about it and I knew Sarah liked these types of things. David saw the letter before I gave it to her. It was sitting on the table and he read a couple lines of it and asked who it was for. I told him my idea, and that's when he told me that he liked Sarah as well. He had planned on asking her out once her life settled down. We were pretty close in high school, not best friends, but I dated his sister for 2 years. Bad move on my part, and it ended poorly and we had some fallout. I didn't cheat on her or anything, but I was a bit selfish. I was a senior and she was a sophomore. I wanted to call it off or go casual, just a fun relationship since I was off to college soon, and she wanted us to work. David and I fell out for a bit after that. We met back up in college, but he always kind of held it over my head that I treated his sister poorly, or that the breakup was unfair. Which is understandable. I was an idiot for dating her in the first place, since I knew I didn't want anything more than a fling. Long story short, he guilts me into giving him the letter to give to Sarah. He said that I owed him one, and that he would call us even after that. I regret it, but at the time, I was still beating myself up over a past relationship. 3 or 4 weeks after he gave her the letter, they started dating, and I just kind of faded out of their lives. I put distance between us because it sucked. I was very bitter and angry. They got on to get engaged 10 months ago, according to Facebook. Sarah, out of the blue, texts me and asks me about one of my recent blogs. I didn't even know she read my blogs. It's about my thoughts on love and relationships. She asks if I've ever written something like that before. I told her I wrote a few in high school. I didn't know at the time, but apparently she treasures that letter. She says it was like the catalyst that got her life back on track. She brings it up often to David, but of course he hates it. One day they get into a fight, basically that he doesn't act or do anything that is on the letter. I miss the guy who wrote this letter for me. I don't know what David said, but Sarah meets up with me later in the week, confronts me with the letter. She said that based on how David acts about the letter every time she brings it up, and the style of how my blogs read, that she knows he didn't write it, and that I was the one who wrote the letter for him. I tried to lie my way out of it, but really, I don't think I had a choice. She wouldn't take no for an answer, so I told her everything, about my feelings, about why I wrote it, and how David ended up with it. She is upset, very upset, and tells me that she hates me to the core, but then thanks me, and that once her life has settled down again, that she would reach out to me again. That same day, she breaks off their engagement. I get a call from David, and he is totally crazy, angry, yelling at me that I sabotaged his relationship, and that I did it on purpose, and I could have never let them get married. A bunch of other stuff. He's mad, and it's understandable. But then he starts telling our mutual friends his version of the story, and I'm getting hateful texts and comments on my blogs from people about it. That was nearly 3 weeks ago, and I'm still getting ghosted by my friends and his. It's getting ridiculous. At this point, I'm beginning to doubt myself. Is what I did wrong? Should I have tried better to lie for David? I feel like regardless of what I told her, she would have believed her initial thought that he didn't write that letter, and that he fell short of her expectations. Why would you accept blame? Your friend was fine with lying to his girlfriend, fiancé, for 3 years about something that was important to her. Don't see how that is on you. So you let him use the letter. She fixated on it, and even after they were engaged, he never did anything else worthy of her attention or praise to turn that letter into a nice memory. She confronted you without your input, and you didn't lie. Exactly what did you do wrong other than to let your friend do what he asked to do and then tell the truth when confronted? Sure, there is more emotional stuff about this, but quite frankly, he tanked his own relationship and didn't need your help to do it.